Hello everyone, this is the Snob-O-Meter Tag, which I'm going to have a go at. I've checked out lots of other people's versions of it, and there's some interesting stuff out there. Particularly Robert G. Reeder, who has some interesting answers, perhaps later on in his video. So anyway, to start, question number one is, what is your definition of book snobbery? And my definition seems to be a little different to most others. I have a Chambers 1996 dictionary, and in that it says that a snob is a person who places too high a value on social status and therefore can lead to admiring those higher up the social ladder and despising those lower down. Yeah. A more general definition seems to be someone who simply thinks that they're better than the other person for being different in some way. That is deemed inferior. But given that dictionary definition, if I wanted to be a book snob, I suppose I might have to admire someone that kind of effortlessly cuts their way through someone like Heidegger, Kant, or Hegel in a reasonably good time, for example. But I would have to despise someone who reads something like celebrity books, perhaps, in whatever form, autobiography, perhaps. I mean, as soon as any of them become famous, there is a book out for sale, possibly even written by themselves, sooner rather than later, which all seems a bit rather sort of ka-ching and not really very chuang tzu or that sort of thing. I mean, if I have a prejudice, it is that I have a tendency to think that celebrity memoirs and that kind of thing are basically sort of pap, that they don't really have much to say of much significance. However, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to know at least a little bit about a few, or to know at least a few life stories. It might even be a decent thing to be able to relate to leading people in society, rather than encountering them on a screen doing what they do very well in dramas and in interviews. They are still part of the tribe, even after all, even if they do live in a private jet. Yeah. But the definition of, I found a thing, kind of the history of the word snob. And apparently it is used in one Thomas Middleton's comedy play of 1608 called A Mad World, where it is quoted as someone says, "She cannot hear me for snobbing," which I think is something to do with sobbing or crying. And there is more. Apparently the role of religion may bring a certain respectability to the vulgar ostentation of a certain snobbishness. So question number 2 says, is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? And basically I kind of sort of can only really think of a celebrity memoir, perhaps some celebrities rather than others. Question number 3, does erotica count as literature? Some interesting answers across the various people who've done the tag again for this one. And well, if there is romance, then I suppose there ought to be erotica as well. It's all in words, and if it's in words, then it's kind of literature. It is question number 4 that is next. And is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? And there's lots of different answers given for this, and I'm kind of going to dodge out and say that classics is better for me simply because they are historical. So yeah, like we can read about ancient Greece or Europe in the 19th century, but what kind of books are being written at the same time? What kind of novels are being written at the same time? So there's all these various wars in ancient Greece, for example, the Persian and then the Peloponnesian. But what does Homer write? Obviously, Homer was before those, but Homer says some things to do with war, obviously, in the Iliad. who is his target audience, for example. So, yeah. Is it better? It can be, but not necessarily. I mean, obviously, if you're enjoying a book for whatever reason, then, well, you can't really beat that, can you? You know, that's where it's at. Question number 5. Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? Wow. I may well have mentioned reading Anna Karenina in the positive, one way or another, even though it isn't it's not the done thing, really, is it? It's just not the done thing, not in my world anyway. I guess we do have a tendency, however, to express things in the natural course of events day to day. So, yep. If that's bragging, then that's bragging. Well, it isn't really, is it? It's just expression. Question number 6. Do audiobooks count as reading? And what about comic books or graphic novels? So, yes, I think they do count as reading. I had originally written down that I don't really know much about comics or graphics, and where I don't, comics are something that perhaps we all did when we were children, yeah, that's I don't have time for comics, you might say, and maybe no worries. I've already read comics back when I was a youth, so they're already covered, as it were. And graphic novels, I kind of sort of thought, well, I've never read one, so but they're graphic novels, so they're a bit like comics, aren't they? So I don't know. But Pat is saying some pretty kind of detailed and persuasive things. Again, at this Robert G. Reader version of the tag. So yeah, you might want to check that out. But my own personal experience with audiobooks has been good and bad. I mean, sort of factual things and some factual things. If I'm doing something else, you lose track of things. But somehow or other, novels seem to be a bit different. I can follow novels somehow or other. I'm not quite sure why. And particularly, I kind of started off with The Good Earth by the Nobel Prize winning Pearl S. Buck. And I think I have that novel in my head. I think I know about that novel, and I think I can talk about it. And I think about it quite often as well. Actually, I think it's an amazing book. One of the best novels I've read. Probably not very highbrow, but maybe it is. She won the Nobel Prize, probably mainly for The Good Earth as well. And I listened to it during the day at work, but managed to follow it somehow or other. Maybe my work is not very taxing from time to time, but I have the words just like I would have the words from reading it off the page. So I think, therefore, I know what words are in the book. So I think that's as pretty well as good as. Yeah. Question number 7. Have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular so-called fluff book? Which is kind of a new word for me, that one. A book, apparently, with little substance to it. Perhaps a self-help book or celebrity memoir. And presumably the original guy who has done this tag wrote in self-help books. There's fluff books. I wonder why. Has anyone got any motivation to help me through that one? But in answer to the question, yes, I have with respect to celebrity memoir, as per my previous answer. Kind of. But maybe I kind of thought my way towards a little better way of going about things. Question number 8. Have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? And no, I can't recall any instance of the fact, funnily enough. But maybe I could go on a little adventure and try and provoke the same. Question number 9. Would you ever be friends with a snob? And maybe you are already. And I'm not sure about this one. We all have our quirks and idiosyncrasies. So a certain amount of snobbery counts as part of the imperfect, according to me. So I don't know. Maybe I haven't really noticed that much. Perhaps I ought to have noticed. Anyway, question number 10. Are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? Aha. Controversy, perhaps? Obviously, the answer is yes and no, in my opinion. Yes, because if you've read a book as compared to yourself that hasn't read that book, aren't you just a little bit more sophisticated than what you had been had you not read it? But perhaps not. I mean, I found myself thinking some years ago that I was a better person than I was 10 years before then. But taking a measure of things beyond the stages of life, I naturally admire people who are very well read and with deep knowledge and can talk freely about things. But I just fail to see how I ought to sneer at those who do not read at all, for example, or hardly read. People have their lives to live. Reading is not a secret, and if people are members of society, they also have a tendency to live it their way. Gardening is very popular in England. There is not a piece of ground anywhere near the houses of England where there isn't a garden of some sort, pretty much. And if there isn't, people might be thinking, who on earth lives there? Yeah. And this is in surprising contrast to America, as I understand things. But there's not, of all the gardens in England, there is not a single one of them that looks the same, I think. So, yeah, that's pretty well the tag. But looking at, checking out all other people who've done the tag, which has been kind of moderately interesting. No, it's been more than moderately. It's been quite interesting. One of the factors that seems to be present, shall we say, is that people tend to say they try not to be a snob. They try not to be a snob. So maybe this is sort of kind of expression and or character, yeah, that we're aware of. But I kind of thought about this a little bit, and I think that anyone who would prefer not to be thought of as a snob or sophisticated because they read might like to admit to themselves, perhaps ought to admit to themselves, that they are more sophisticated than they would be had they never read anything at all in their lives. And that is okay, as they say. That is the way it is. We just need to appreciate that what we have is what it is, the substance of it, and not contrast it to what anyone else has. And that is a good way to be. Besides, everyone has their moments. The vindictive, the abusive, the hateful, the unthinkingly hostile, the categorizers and dehumanizers. The ones with a wilder, violent sense of pack mentality. You know, the ones perpetually descending into existential crisis when the other person appears too different in some way. To think less of them is not snobbery. Everyone else makes up the nation, the whole human race even, potentially, and they have their reckoning and pathway just like everyone else. Apart from the fact that there is always someone better than you at things, there might always be someone worse. But they're all on the proverbial team. Strangers, ready for cultural signs and sounds and cohesive social action, if not interaction. And you can either cut yourself off from people or not. Yeah. The last question is to tag other people. And certainly if you've got this far, please consider yourself tagged. Absolutely. And yeah, that's my take on things. And well, bye for now.